he also did his master's. He also did his master's engineering degree in energy efficient lighting. He's been actively involved with research in the energy efficiency field since 2006 and has authored a number of papers on the topic of energy efficient lighting. He is a certified measurement and verification professional and a member of the Association of Energy Engineers, the AEE. He's also a technical signatory for measurement and verification, as well as energy performance certificate inspections. He serves as a member of both the M&V and EPC Specialist Technical Committee of SANAS, and he also serves as a SANAS team leader and technical assessor for M&V and EPC assessments. He's the technical signatory for energy management and validation services. Now, EMVS has been an accredited EPC inspection body for 3 years already. So they are also the very first EPC inspection body to be accredited by SANAS. And EMVS services have also issued the very first EPC for a building at University Stellenbosch, the Admin 1 building. So welcome here, Adil. Really nice to have you and nice to meet you. Then Christo van der Merwe, you all know him if you've trained for certified measurement and verification professional. Christo has his master's in mechanical engineering. He is a CMVP as well as a certified energy manager. He's a member of MVCSA, the SAC, the AEE, as well as the Efficiency Evaluation Organization, which is EVO, the custodians of the IPMVP protocol for performance measurement. Christo is an EVO accredited level 3 trainer to train CMVP. He's one of only 2 CMVP trainers on our continent. Christo is constantly involved in workshops and work groups to improve training standards and protocols, and he also has a vast experience in energy management and energy auditing. He is a trainer for the Institute of Energy Professionals Africa, which is the organization that I belong to, and he was involved in the curriculum development and is involved in curriculum development for the QCTO qualification called Energy Audit Technician. Christo is the owner of CFJM Solutions. It's a specialist industry energy consulting firm and one of the very few SANAS M&V inspection bodies left at the moment. He's got almost, I think, clearly 20 years experience, being involved in close to 500 M&V projects spanning from Eskom, DSM, M&V processes, 12I and 12L tax incentives, DOE financed municipal energy efficiency projects, performance contracting assessments and verifications. These assessments all covered types of projects and energy sources across industrial, commercial, agricultural, residential and health sectors. He also assisted Namibia in defining the basics for the M&V industry a few years ago. So welcome, Christo. I'm going to hand over to Christo. He's going to start the discussions. Thereafter, Adil is going to go over the ISO 17020 as well as the TRAT-02 documents. So the discussions today will be based on the documentation available that needs to be adhered to and how Christo and Adil have applied that in practice. Thereafter, after Adil has discussed the documentation, Christo and Adil will share practical application of these standards, the ISO 17020, in practice. After that, we will open the floor to questions and answers. We'll look at scenarios that you can present, and Christo and Adil will try and answer your questions. using the SANAS documentation as well as the ISO 17020. One important thing I need to highlight is the EPC is a very new regulation. There's some gray areas. There's things that we don't all agree on. However, we can't discuss here today what it should have been and give you information on how to do it the way it should be done. We can only share information based on the regulation and standards that are available as is. Any questions that we cannot answer, we will note down, Gabriel will note that down for us. We will get the experts in the industry to answer that and then circulate the clarification of the questions that we were not able to answer. And we will get that to you to make sure the correct information is shared. So thank you very much for attending. I know it's a long introduction, but a lot of explanations were necessary to make sure we start this off correctly. Krista, over to you.
Cool. Thank you very much, Yolanda, Gabriel, Tida, and team. Welcome to everyone to this webinar. I just want to get a confirmation that you are actually seeing my screen. Yes? Great stuff. Yes, thanks, guys. Appreciate that. Let me just move a couple of things around. Wonderful Windows that always think they can move the stuff in the way they think you need to look at it instead of the way you want to look at it. So yeah, excellent. Thank you very much again for that introduction, Yolanda. Very much appreciated here. I see Linda Grindling is online here, so welcome, Linda. Linda, thank you very much. I'm glad you could join us. This adds so much more experience to this very, very contentious topic of conflict of interest in the whole EPC process. We are planning here to, we've done some preparatory work here, looking at around about 2.5 to 3 hours of talk from our side, and then we will open up the floor to you guys for some questions if there hasn't been any answered yet, or if you haven't fallen asleep yet. After the first 20 minutes, we should roughly be done, actually. So it's not 2.5 minutes, hours. All right, so we've been introduced. Linda here also, she is actually the accreditation manager for inspection at SANAS. And if there are any dedicated questions, she will, of course, highlight from her side where Adil and I do not have the clout to do so. All right, so there are 4 basic discussions here that we have going around. We've been discussing the EPC process and everything, well, since around about February, even more earlier, since the regulation came out. And therefore, again, why the webinars are there with all the questions we got from all the training and so forth, with the discussions, as well as the practical application of the training sessions. There's a lot of questions coming out, and we then draw in the experts, whether it's the steering committees from the SABS or the SANAS or SANEDI or DMRE, to highlight these questions and come to a common understanding. So eventually out of this, Sanedian team will hope to bring about a full explanatory document, clarification notes, so that everybody can understand and work under the same field of understanding. And therefore, whatever we get out of these webinars, we take to the parties, and they can use it as such as well. Great. So number one, let's have a quick discussion just on conflict of interest and then what is allowed during the EPC inspection and certification during an inspection. Excuse me. And then we'll be looking at what does verification of the data mean, which addresses stuff like conflict of interest as well as credibility. And then boundaries of data use, who may use what, so forth, and all that. We've anticipated some questions coming forward, so we've prepared some of those discussions. But I think the first thing that we need to put out there clearly is actually what does the standard say? And the standard I'm referring to specifically 17020 of 2012. That is the standard applicable for inspection bodies. And it details, it's got dedicated sections on impartiality and independence, which deals with conflict of interest. And then SANAS also has a clarification, or not a clarification document, a technical document, which basically, in simplest terms, translate the 17020 wording to an EPC environment of what is expected in terms of this. And this is where Adil will come in, talk about that section, as he's also part of the SANAS accreditation team. He's got much more clout than I have on this to talk about the stuff. So we will first show you in terms of what does the standard say, and then we take it from there, and then we go over on to practical examples and so forth. Adil has asked me to just make some apologies. His camera is giving trouble again. What he actually doesn't know is that I disabled the camera because he's so much more handsome than I am. But he will then talk clearly to all of us in terms of the next couple of sections. Thank you, Adil.
Thank you, Christo. Is my sound coming through? Okay, thanks. At this stage, I just want to say thank you for the introduction done by Yolanda. I just want to mention that currently I'm speaking in my capacity as an EMBS technical signatory. I am a SANAS assessor, but I'm not speaking on behalf of SANAS in this webinar. I'm just speaking on behalf of EMBS as a technical signatory. Okay, so as Christo mentioned, so basically, just rolling it back a little bit, if you want to become accredited as an EPC inspection body, there are basically two documents that you have to work with and be compliant with. One is the standard for EPCs, which is the SANS 1544, and the other document is the ISO 1720 document. There are also then some SANAS documents and stuff that you also need to comply with, but these are the main two, let's say, technically like the documents that you have to work through. So what we will be showing in the next couple of slides is extracts of the documents. It's mostly the ISO 1720, and as Kristen mentioned, the TR80-2 as well. The TR80-2 being the newest or the most recent version of the TR80. So these are all extractions specifically related to impartiality in those documents. Obviously, the documents have other things as well, but these are specifically related to impartiality. So what the standard 1720 says about impartiality is that, so just as a bit of a, we're talking about conflict of interest here, but obviously how you manage your impartiality. If you manage your impartiality effectively, then that leads to you managing your conflict of interest effectively as well, which is why we are talking a lot here about impartiality and independence. What the 1720 says about impartiality in clause 4.1 is that inspection activities shall be undertaken impartially, meaning basically that you're not allowing yourself to be influenced by any outside factors when you are assessing and rolling for an EPC. The inspection body, when it comes to that impartiality, the inspection body itself is solely responsible for the impartiality of its inspection activities. Now, where that becomes important is that you can have inspection bodies that are part of a large organization. You can have inspection bodies that stand on their own. But when it is part of a larger organization, the onus is still on the inspection body itself to be responsible for the impartiality. So an inspection body, to an extent, that inspection body shouldn't even allow its own company that it's involved in to do anything that influences its impartiality when it performs the inspection activities. Okay. Another one of the requirements of the 1720 is that the inspection body identify risks to its impartiality and on an ongoing basis. These types of risks could include, could be related to its inspection activities. It could be related to its business relationships, or even just the relationships of the personnel.
Can I interrupt you quickly?
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit louder? I see people so they can't hear clearly.
Is it better now? Let me just, okay. Is it better? Can I get a thumbs up? Okay. Yeah, so where was I? Oh, yeah, okay. So the inspection body needs to identify the risks to its impartiality on an ongoing basis, and these risks can include, can be related to its inspection activities. It can be related to its business relationships. It can be related to its the relationships of its personnel. In other words, if you have inspection personnel that are family in other entities, your relationship to your personnel's relationships to other entities could also be a risk to your impartiality. If a risk to impartiality is identified, the inspection body must demonstrate how it eliminates that risk or it minimizes that risk. So that's another requirement of the 1720 when it comes to the whole impartiality aspect. Another important fact here to look at is when it says the inspection body shall have top management commitment to impartiality. That is very important, especially you get, once again, looking at if you have an inspection body that is ring-fenced and only does inspection, then top management is part of that inspection body. So the commitment is sort of implied in part. But if your inspection body sits inside a large organization, your top management might not be part of that inspection body, which makes it important that the top management, which sort of sits outside of your inspection body, must also have the same types of commitment towards the impartiality of that inspection body, because that top management still ultimately controls the inspection body. So that commitment is really important. And another one so in 1720, there are basically two types of independence, two types of inspection bodies that you can be. You can be a type E or a type C, and the inspection body is required to be independent, relative to the requirements of those two types. Your type A inspection body is basically a third party inspection body. What that means is that the inspection body, just in example terms, the inspection body is not involved in any energy management type activities. It's basically, when it comes to the energy performance industry, it basically just does inspections. If you do stuff outside of energy, that's a different story. But if you're working in the energy field, you are basically doing inspections and no actual energy management or anything like that. Type C allows for you to do inspections. It allows for the larger company to do energy management, and then to have an inspection body inside of its company that does EPC inspections as well. Next slide, Kristen. Whoever's controlling the slide. Oh, thank you. So yeah, type A independence. Yeah, it's with reference to Appendix A1 of the SANS 1720. which basically says the inspection body shall be independent of the parties involved. In other words, your inspection body must be independent from the client, building owner, in the case of EPCs, even the data gatherers, or if there's an energy services company involved in the link, your inspection body must be independent from all the parties that's involved. The inspection body, and very importantly, and its personnel, shall not engage in any activities that may conflict with the independence of judgment and integrity in relation to the inspection activities. In other words, once again, taking it to EPCs, the inspection body and its personnel can't be involved in any activities that influences the energy consumption of the building. So any energy management type consulting or activities or implementation of projects, etc., when you are a type A inspection body. Once again, just in terms of the inspection body itself shall not be involved, as well as its personnel, but what the next section speaks to is also that the legal entity itself shall also not be linked. In other words, if you're a type A inspection body, your legal entity shall not be part of let's say, an energy management entity having shares in your company and so on, or ownership in your company. So your type A needs to be solidly independent from any, in this case, example, energy management type role or facility or whatever the case may be. The next slide, Kristen. Type C independence is different. So with type C independence, this also refers to Appendix A3 of the SANS 1720. Now, type C, as I mentioned earlier, can be involved in energy management activities, which now means that the management of impartiality becomes almost more of it's something that it requires a bit more focus, because you're not just saying we're not doing any energy management. You're saying we're doing energy management, but now you need to really focus on how you are going to manage your impartiality between your energy management leg of your company and your EPC inspection leg of your company. So basically that's what the first point is about, is the inspection body must provide safeguards within its organization to ensure that there's adequate segregation between the responsibilities and accountabilities between the inspection activities and other activities. There needs to be a separation there. The design, manufacture, supply, installation, servicing, maintenance, and the inspection of the same item carried out by a type C inspection body shall not be undertaken by the same person. So basically what that means is you can't have the same personnel involved in energy management activities that is also your EPC inspector. There needs to be a clear separation between the personnel involved. So the note says inspections carried out by a type C inspection body cannot be classified as a third-party inspection. Basically, like I mentioned, what a third party was in the previous type A, where you are totally independent. It's just saying type C is not a full third-party type inspection. So when it comes to type C, it is a tricky thing. But the requirement is that you must demonstrate how you manage your impartiality and how you basically can prove that you are not being influenced by the other leg of your company. Basically, how inside of your type C, inside of your organization, how that type C entity is still independent and impartial. You need to show that, rather than you need to be able to demonstrate that to be compliant to being a type C inspection body. And I just want to see, so need to have, so you basically need to have some form of risk and impartiality management system. and you need to be able to track. Just a slight practical example here. I know we're going to get to practical examples later on in the presentation, but just thinking about how do you show that your EPC inspector was not involved in any energy management type activities. Proving a negative is very difficult because how do you show someone was not involved in something? Energy management activities, if you write a report or something to that effect, it only really lists the person who wrote the report. You don't know if your EPC inspector was involved in any other aspects of that energy management activity. So the onus is on the Type C entity to be able to track and show clearly how they are able to manage that type of scenario, or how they're able to prove that the EPC inspector, inspection body inside its entity, is completely independent from its other activities. I think that's that for that slide, Kristen. What is the next slide? Okay, so when it comes to the SANA's TR80 technical requirements, so from the slide here, what we're talking about here is that you need to do an impartiality risk assessment for every project EPC that you're doing. That has to do with the clause where you need to consistently look at your impartiality. So you need to do a risk assessment every time you do an EPC inspection to see how it relates to your impartiality on that job. As I mentioned previously, when it comes to Type A, when you comply as Type A, it means you pretty much have no conflict because you are a total independent entity from anyone else involved in the project. And you're also you weren't involved in the work or anything that happened on that project site. So you are complete independent when you are a Type A inspection body. When you are a Type C inspection body, now it means that you now have to manage your conflict of interest a bit more than a completely independent entity has to. So yeah, so you basically have to manage the risk to show that there's no outside pressures that will affect your reporting of the results. So the results for Type C must still always, all the results presented by any EPC inspection body must be independent and must not be subject to outside interference. Yeah, a Type A inspection body basically should get the same result as a Type C inspection body, the same EPC, yeah. And impartiality and competence requirements for Type A and Type C are the same, only the independence requirements are different. Next slide, Kristen. Okay, so on this slide, I'm gonna hand back over to Kristen, and Kristen will take us some data verification and after some practical examples, and he'll call on some of those as well. Over to you, Kristen.
Excellent. Thank you, Adil. Thank you. So please note, this is not the full 17020 sections. This is a section about impartiality and highlighted the main issues and main requirements that the standards and the technical requirements give to you. There's still a whole lot of stuff that you need to do. And these 4, 5, 6 simple slides means a lot of work that needs to go into this whole thing about controlling impartiality. Between Adil and I, we both have been part of big organizations where impartiality management played an absolutely large role, not being influenced by top management, not being influenced by business profits, not being influenced by, do you have work tomorrow, or is retrenchment ongoing, and. So all that sort of stuff that puts a lot of pressure onto someone in terms of performing. And this is one of the main reasons why you typically do not want to have someone actually having a percentage of a fee or something when you do an inspection, and the result will realize a form of a tax incentive or a benefit like a better EPC grade and so forth. The pressures can get real hard. You need to keep your cool. You need to keep your stance. We've been approached many times with ways and questions and discussions on how can we improve the results, looking at it in inverted commas. And it comes back to that you need to keep your independence. It does not mean that we are the only ones that are right, the inspectors. It means get to the table, get all the inputs, but sift through that and make sure, and this is where data verification comes in, make sure that the information that you have is as such. So a couple examples would be, this is a bit out of line, but it comes back to EPC as well, presenting a 12L tax incentive performance assessment, and all stakeholders looking at this and says, no, it can't be, this is too much, it doesn't make sense based on experience on other areas and yada, 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 yada. And then if you have done your impartiality checks properly, you can show that you haven't had vested interest, you haven't had conflict of interest, you haven't been influenced to get such a result, and therefore the data speaks for itself and it can be accepted as is. So a couple of pointers that you need to look at in terms of the EPC process is, number one, always verify any potential conflict of interest and its proper management thereof. As listed earlier in the slides, is assume you are guilty of conflict of interest and you need to prove it otherwise. Don't assume there's nothing. Go look for that devil there, because someone else might see it and someone else might use that. Where does this come into play? When you are on the edge of a D and an E graduation, meaning if you get a classified as a E for the EPC, that means you need to put in money to do the building and improve that and improve that. So you would like to avoid that. So let's put a bit of pressure on this guy, Johnny Green or Johnny Purple or some biltong, whatever the case might be. I'll send you the address later for the whiskey and biltong. Just so that you can get a degrading and you do not have to do anything at this stage. This will become even more pertinent with the new 10400 due to release at some stages. For those of you that have gone through the 10400 XA, the new one, has seen that many of the targets for the degrading has been reduced. Some of them has been halved. So that puts you even in more pressure to report properly, as some of these buildings that has now been graded as a D, for instance, might as well be graded as an F at the later stage. All right. So go look for that devil in the detail. And the most common devil is actually within your own organization, your own entity. We all need money. We all need bread and butter to live. So you need to get the job done. If you don't have the data, then okay, let's see if no one noticed. We make an assumption and we go on that going forward. It's not allowed. You need to have proper traceability on all your information. Where does it come from? Is it working properly? Is it actually properly representing the actual facts as is? And therefore, there's a lot of emphasis placed on calibration and verification in terms of your data and your information. So calibration, where anything is measured, it needs to be traceable to some form of calibration somewhere. Otherwise, how do you know this thing is actually working and measuring properly? And remember, it's not just calibration. It's actually making certain the installation, the setup, and the working of that system is well and good. Doesn't help you have a diesel flow meter for 5-inch pipe, but it only feeds the actual diesel feed is in a 2-inch pipe. The flow meter is not made for that. It's not proper. It's not correct. Although the flow meter is actually calibrated, it's not going to give you correct answers. All right. So double check not only just calibration, but also double check proper installation, proper setup, and proper working of the information systems. Most of the time on billing, it is assumed that it is correct and it's acceptable under 17020 and the TR documents. But it's always good practice to just go double check, is that meter actually correct? One thing about billing that we know, especially in the larger metros, is we get a lot of estimated data. And estimators we know are just as useful as absolutely nothing. Therefore, you cannot use estimated data. You cannot work with estimated data. And then it's always advisable for the client to have some form of check meter at one stage or another. If there's any check metering there, that's great, because then you can do some cross verification. I'll get back to sample verification later. Then you can do cross verification. If you know your own system is proper and correct and calibrated and ticks all the good boxes, then of course you can double check on the Munich meters as well, or the ESCO meters, or whomever supplies your electricity or your diesel or your steam or whatever energy input you have at that stage. This is quite important in terms of EPC when you have your own generation capacity where it's not being done by a Munich or utility. Therefore, you need to follow proper meter installation and practices. The old SANS 474, yes, deals with metering and actual proper installation. And although it's only focusing on electrical metering, you can use those concepts for stuff like gas flow meters, diesel flow meters, steam flow meters, your own PV systems. And if you use Martian soil, then also that sort of weightometers that you have in place there as well. Right. Sample verification is another good practice to make sure that everything is proper. Someone handing you a bunch of plans and stating this is the latest floor plans, and you just accepting that means there's a conflict of interest there. You just accepted that person's word. And as we know, even in court and wherever, although a person's word meant a lot in the old ages, when it comes to proof of accuracy, proof of impartiality, you need to go and verify that. Therefore, you can use stuff like sample verification. You don't need to go and inspect each and every room as listed on those plans. If you come across and sampling is well defined in the M&V industry, you guys can go look some of those guidelines up, and it can be actually applied on the EPC scene here as well. And if you find that your sample verification shows these plans as properly representing the actual scenario, that means you dealt with that conflict of interest portion there, that you didn't just take someone's word for it. You didn't make an assumption. You didn't just use it. You've gone and verified it. All right. Another section when it comes to conflict of interest with data verification as well is you must witness. Someone, not just only the technical signatory, but someone deemed competent with proof that this person is competent to do the job, can go and witness these EPC activities. It doesn't mean the technical signatory has to be there, but there needs to be some form of traceability there that shows the technical signatory has now my English airtime ran out. Oh crap, sorry. Has trained this person, has tested this person, has witnessed this person, and by all standards and stuff, this person is competent to do the job in terms of making sure the floor plans are correct, for instance. And by having that person then sign off on the job, the technical signatory will do a couple of sample verifications, him or herself, and if found that all protocols has been followed properly, that means the technical signatory can sign off. However, remember, a technical signatory can never just do a plain rubber stamp. That is not your purpose. There needs to be some stuff in place that you need to double check and make sure. Because under this accreditation, like with MNV, the technical signatory is the one that is accountable for the certificate being issued. Not the CEO or the CFO or the buddy next to you, or he said, she said. The technical signatory is the one that takes full responsibility and accountability for that certificate and the values on those. Therefore, the onus is so much higher, the pressure is so much higher on the technical signatory to be absolutely sure. Don't laugh, Lydia. I need to work into the whole presentation here. Come on, guys. You're not helping. So the pressure is so much higher on the technical signatory in terms of conflict of interest, to not fall, to not just, it's too much. We need to get money in. We need to get more meters. We need to just stamps. No, you need to have the integrity and the credibility of person to make sure that you've dealt with all conflicts of interest. And this is again where a large role also plays in terms of where does the SANA's accredited EPC entity and their leaders sit with relevant to whomever is the main leader of a group of companies, and what's the pressure there? If they form part of top management and they've got the mandate publicly declared that they will not be influenced by the board of the directors or whomever, that's the piece of paper that says it. How do you ensure that it does not happen? All right, again, you are guilty until proven otherwise. So put those measures in place, minutes of meetings, declarations, and. If need be, bring a buddy to back you up. Okay. Assumptions and rated values versus measured values. It comes back again to conflict of interest. It comes back to if your outcome will declare this building as a grade D or a grade C, or a grade C or a grade B, you are on that edge. Using an assumption and you get the better grade, how do you prove your assumption hasn't been influenced by some form of pressure or experience or feeling or event even that has happened? Just yesterday, I quickly took a break and I saw something with my wife on Showmax. It's about huisgenoot real life dramas. And it was about this school bus many years ago that had an accident and went over the railing in the bridge into the dam, and all these dead children and right about at the end of that portion, excuse me, was a optometrist person that said the family came into about 3-4 months later, came into the practice for their regular eye tests, and the father walked with the optometrist to the filing cabinet, and as the optometrist was getting the family's information, the father said, please destroy the daughter's folder and information. she's not with us anymore. And then all of a sudden it clicked with that optometrist person that, oh crap, these were people in this accident. And to make matters worse, he was actually one of the first response guys. He was coincidentally was a diver on that day. He had to help pull out bodies from under the water. The fact of the whole thing is that simple event shook him up so badly that day, he was not able to perform his professional duty. A simple eye exam. He had to get other people in to do so. This is also a conflict of interest. If you're under some form of emotional stress, which is brought forth by COVID, lack of job, lack of income, your sick husband or your sick person or child, whatever, you need to understand how that affects your clarity in performing the job as good and as properly as possible. So, coming back to this, assumptions versus and rated values, you need to understand and apply SANA's requirements for calibration versus SANS 1544 that sort of hints and gives you an idea that you can estimate the exclusion energy use for the excluded areas. Bottom line, if in doubt, you follow the SANA's protocol. If you are unable, especially if you are close to the border between two types of grading, then follow the SANA's protocol. Because if someone else comes back and they redo the whole thing according to the book, and they come to a way different answer than you are, or that you declared at that stage, which is detrimental to the client, we all know what's going to happen there. Especially, as Yolanda said, there are some penalties coming. And we are expecting, we have no word, so it's expecting that some of us have, is that if you're not a grade D, you will be pushed by law that you need to at least get a D grading. Not a D grade, but a D letter delta grade. All right. And this speaks in terms of weaker ratings, conservative results, and certificate gradings as well. Is, again, if you're on the edge and let's say stupid reality says there's some form of a reward available, that if this building is classified as a C, you will get paid twice than what your quoted costs are. That is a clear conflict of interest. That is a clear undue pressure upon you as an auditor. You can see yourself as a financial auditor to report better than what it reality is. And remember, this will turn around and bite you in the behind. It has been proven over and over and over again in the past that the moment you do not follow the book, the moment that you let undue pressure get to you, the moment that you are not impartial anymore, it will turn around and will bite you in the behind. And you will always be caught out. The wheel always turns on that. All right, there's a couple of questions there. I think let's keep to what has been given in terms of, let's discuss it later on. I would like, if you guys do not mind, that we speak about some typical impartiality and conflict of interest examples that's actually happening in the industry at this stage. Let's start with the first one. Energy assessments and EPC assessment. Can the same entity do both? Yes, but T's and C's apply. You cannot audit your own work. Never. So if you have been involved in that building for some consultancy measure and so forth, you've got vested interest there in terms of an EPC rating. What will happen that after all your 2, 3, 4 years of consultations and implementations and so forth, you do the EPC assessment and you come to a grade E, or even worse, a grade F. Won't that look bad on you as an energy management consultant? Now you've got that pressure to actually report better because my work hasn't had an effect that we had to look at. So no, you cannot audit or you cannot assess your own work. Nothing prevents you as part of an energy assessment to have an EPC assessment done with it as well, to check on the progress as you go with implementation of energy efficient measures. Are you getting to a better grading, yes or no, and so forth. But you cannot give a certificate stamped as a SANAS accredited EPC entity for that work. You need to get a third party, independent party in to do so. Can you do an EPC? Excuse me. Can you do an EPC assessment and then later on advise on energy audit and so forth as well? Yes and no. Very difficult, very difficult. I would rather say preferably not. Reason being, now I'm talking about the same person doing the work. Remember, you've got a type A and you've got a type C. So we'll speak about the two in the meantime now. If you've done an EPC and you've got a grade delta D, and then you can list to the client, listen, during our assessment, it looks like you've got some lighting opportunities and aircon opportunities and swimming pool opportunities and what have you. We can help you with that. All right. How do the client know that you haven't purposefully given a bad EPC rating to get the energy management work? Clearly, again, conflict of interest. How do you eliminate that? Absolutely separate entities that do the work. Even with a type C body, we have two different persons doing the work. It becomes difficult. It's doable, but it becomes very difficult to prove that one hasn't influenced the other. Whether it was an energy assessment up front and then an EPC later on, or an EPC assessment up front and then the energy later on, it becomes very difficult. So you need to have and demonstrate and prove a clear line of the two parties doing the two separate work. All right. Can you use EPC data and energy audit data together? Why not? But remember, again, terms and conditions apply. If someone has done an energy audit in terms of searching for potentials for energy efficiency projects and so forth, and you as a third party come in for the EPC assessment, if you can verify that that audit data is correct and usable for the EPC work, then it's fine. You have proven that this data is correct. But if you just take that data on face value, you let conflict of interest get the better of you because someone else has influenced your EPC assessment. All right. EPC and metering services. Can a company that do metering services also do EPC? Can the same person doing metering services also do EPC? If you follow the rules, yes. A metering service doesn't necessarily mean that there will be an energy improvement project or energy management project or program coming out of that. That you are actually, as the metering expert, giving energy management projects to the client as well. It simply means you are giving metering data to whomever is entitled to that. You then, as the metering service, need to prove that the metering data is properly and correctly and credibly given to whomever needs to get it. And then therefore, of course, you can do EPC assessments as well. But again, keep in mind always, go look for that impartiality devil, that conflict of interest devil. Go look for that stuff. EPC and data gathering for EPC. If you use third parties or independent parties, if you use the building owner, facility managers themselves to get your data, it comes back to the same for metering services. You cannot accept that data blindly. Remember, there's a conflict of interest on the building with the building guys, the facility managers, to give you better data for a better EPC rating. And it's possible because calculating the EPC is easy. It's kilowatt hours per square meter. It's defining those two simple values, kilowatt hours and the square meter, and having been sure that those are not influenced by some form of conflict. That is where the problem lies. And that is where the whole SANAS accreditation process is focused on as well, to make sure that the data you get is credible. That's why a blood test laboratory is also SANAS accredited. You would really like to know that you either have AIDS or you don't have AIDS, or you have COVID or you don't have COVID, or you've got Kukumakranka's disease or you don't have Kukumakranka's disease. In any case, this is what Kukumakranka disease looks like. So it's not deadly, but you don't look that good always, or speak that well either. All right, contracting in. Now, there's a difference between contracting in and subcontracting. Subcontracting is defined that you get someone else in to do the full EPC assessment for you. It's only allowed under one condition with the whole SANAS system, and that is the one that you subcontract needs to be a fully SANAS accredited entity themselves. And it makes sense. Otherwise, we get this subcontracting problem that we have in typical government infrastructure projects. Subcontracting, and then the bridge falls onto a couple of motorists and stuff, and then we have problems. Contracting in means that you are in need of additional hands and feet and resources. The onus stays with you as the accredited EPC entity that has been appointed for that EPC assessment. That onus stays with you to prove that the people, the resources are competent, they got the proper information, the information is credible, and all conflict of interest has been dealt with. And this is where, as Adil said earlier, I might get an EPC. Now I've got 200 buildings that I need to go through. Okay, Adil, come out, come help me, please. Not only do I know Adil is SANAS accredited EPC 001, 301, but I need to go double check. Adil, I've got building A, B, and C. These guys said they did have energy management practices before. Please prove to me that you have not been involved in that. Not please tell me that you would. No, please prove to me that you have not been involved. The moment they tell you, no. If it's proven, yes, and it's very difficult to prove. Like Adil said, it's how do you prove a negative? How do you prove that you haven't done it? There's a couple of ways to go about it, but you need to think about it clearly. So conflict of interest is not just on you as the EPC person and the entity and the technical signatory and whomever you are in the game, but also whomever you use and wherever you use and whatever you use in the whole EPC process calculation. This is why the EPC is deemed as complicated and overrated and everything, because it comes back to kilowatt hours and square meterage, and how true and reflective are those two values of the real world case. How was it influenced? How did you get it? All right. Many of the EPC practitioners will, of course, have some form of energy management experience. I started off as an energy manager in my career, and then went over and then specialized in measurement and verification. But still, to this day, as I do an inspection of a facility, I can identify certain opportunities. Is it for me to highlight those opportunities? No. Is it for me to make suggestions on those opportunities? No. Because that means I'm involved in the energy management process and not in the M&V process. Exactly the same with the EPC. That means you are not an independent or impartial. Let's leave the word independent. Let's bring in impartial, because type C, you always never can really be independent, but you can be impartial. As you perform your EPC assessment, you need to stay impartial in the game. Otherwise, you've got vested interest. Vested interest means you can be influenced, and that means you need to go the extra effort, the extra mile to prove that you have not been influenced. That conflict of interest has been dealt with. What you can do, what is allowable, is simply state that you've witnessed a couple of opportunities. You're not going to tell him, he, her, it, whatever, what it is, but you recommend they get an energy management of a reputable group in to perform whatever is needed to do. Then the next question will come, okay, but who is reputable? Saneria has set up an ESCO database. You can refer them to them. SAEEC has got a database of reputable, you can refer to the SAEE persons. And again, therefore you stay impartial. Always keep your impartiality in check. With everything that we discussed above, eventually, this last point, joint ventures, collaboration, conglomerates, proposing a full spectrum of energy management services. Audits, EPCs, MNV, 12L certificates, improvements, carbon taxes, carbon credit trading, the whole spectrum. It's possible, but keep your impartiality in check. And again, always remember, you need to prove your innocence, because you will be assumed guilty of fudging the numbers. So get your ducks in a row, get your information in a row, get your proof in a row, and that should be part of your presentation of your certificate. Many people just get a certificate of a laboratory test or a calibration test or something. But what they do not know is there are papers and papers at the back of that actually that shows how it was done, what was done, how did we get impartiality, how did we do credibility, and. So on the EPC side, giving the certificate means it's the end of having gone through all of that stuff, especially conflict of interest. How did you manage that? And not being influenced. And that's why it's good to not just issue a certificate, but a short report as well for how was the data obtained and what credibility. All right. Adil, anything else you would like to say on this stuff, mate?
No, Chris, I think you covered everything.
Thank you. Linda, are there anything, if you're here, anything you would like to add from Sana's perspective, please?
Hi, Christo. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for giving me the opportunity. No, Christo, I think you guys did a very good job in explaining all these issues. So there's nothing for me to add at the moment, except, of course, if there are any questions later on, I will be willing to answer those. But well done.
Oh, excellent. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I think indeed we came towards this section of additional discussion topics from the cloud. You cannot say from the table or from the floor because we are not on the floor and we don't. So let's stick with the cloud and the cameras and so forth.
Krista, I'll go through the questions to make it easier for you.
Okay,
So the first one was from Louis Erasmus. He says, I assume then that if you were the consultant on a specific building, you cannot do the EPC. And Jared Lake added to that to say that if you are an inspection body, or if an inspection body does an EPC, the company cannot consult for the same client. So I think you did address that.
Let's just hear from the cloud. Louis, you happy with what we did so far, or would you like some more discussions on that?
Krista, no, thank you very much. I think you've answered my question earlier on during your discussion. Thank you.
All right. Jared, from your side?
Yeah, all answered. Thank you.
Excellent, excellent.
Then
Sorry,
Louis
Yolanda.
also, sorry?
Sorry. I would say that if you did the one or the other, you're not permanently banned from doing other services for that client at some stage. But of course, it will be frowned upon and you will definitely have been influenced if you did one right after the other. But if there is a period of 3 or 4 or 5 years between what you did for the one and then for the other, and you've managed the conflict of interest very well and declared and clearly defined that, then it shouldn't be a problem. But again, remember on what are you being accredited as a type A or as a type C? In this case, you must be a type C because you have been involved and you might be still involved in other activities than the EPC in this case. Linda?
Krista, I would just like to also add to what you are saying there. It is 100% true. And typically, what one would expect is that in your procedure, your inspection body procedure for impartiality and doing work for people, for companies that you have issued EPCs for, there will be an indication of what that timeline is going to be, and that timeline will be discussed or decided upon by the inspection body based on the risk involved in terms of breaching impartiality. So that will be something that will need to be proceduralized, and the assessors will be looking at that and seeing, what the expectation is in terms of after how many years may I visit that customer again, etc., etc.
Thank you. Thank you. I would say yes, if you're unsure what is a good enough time to be involved or split the two activities, then look at what you're comfortable with when you sign a non-disclosure agreement or non-competition agreement. These things typically go about between 3 and 5 years before you can actually do the same or with whomever you made that agreement. So use that a bit. Think in terms of if it was turn around on yourself as well. You wouldn't like someone else doing it immediately tomorrow. It's not going to work like that. Yolanda, thanks.
Yes. So Nandipa asked, what form of evidence should be provided as an instrument to document how the IB is managing impartiality? I do think you've covered that. Nandipa, are you happy with the
You are muted.
Nandipa?
Thank you. Good morning.
Morning.
The question I have is that practically when you're developing the documents themselves, what is the form of evidence? I've heard the mention of a declaration. I hope it's a sworn declaration. And I'm trying to see the link between the document insofar as the issues of risk management and the actual undertaking of management to impartiality, because those two for me are different. There's impartiality when on operations, there's an impartiality when you deal with support systems, there's impartiality with management. And I don't seem to see how then we deal with impartiality at the various levels, such that when you put the document has covered your management, which is at output level. Then you look at activity level and you look at input level, because there are impartialities at all those levels, as indicated in the examples. So my interest was in terms of documentation, what is it that you put at each level to prove that? Thanks.
It is absolutely difficult proving your innocence at that areas. And the only thing that I can say here, I'll let Adil and Linda speak now as well. The only thing that I would say is my motto in life is keeping it straight and simple, in terms of if there's too much of that, then the business model is not suitable for what we want to do. If there's too many impartial problems at so various levels, then rather walk away from the job than try and get it. Or your business structure is not properly suited for EPC type of work, then you might need to rethink that. The moment you have trouble thinking on how can I prove my innocence, and you have trouble doing that, means the impartiality problem is actually too big. Then resolving impartiality should take another form, instead of trying to explain it away or procedure it away or form it away. Then you might need to think on other stuff. Then the simplest way typically is like with a type A, eliminate it. And that might mean something different, like a business restructure, for instance. Linda?
Yeah, I wanted to just say, I would like to hear from Linda and Adil on that as well, because that is a topic I'm very interested into.
Okay, so just from my side, I think Advocate Nandipa asked for an example. How would she, I think the question was, Yolanda, if I'm not mistaken, what evidence can you provide? So just to look at one example, let's say you are a type C inspection body. What that means is that you will be doing EPCs for certain customers, but you might also be doing other energy-related services for other customers. So one way of showing that your impartiality steps, or the steps that you take to ensure partiality, one way to show that evidence is in the form of your organizational chart. So you can, for example, show that your EPC body personnel, and let's call them your other energy personnel, are completely segregated, and there is no cross links between the two. So if a person is doing EPCs, he or she will not be able to also do other work at the very same company. So that is a very strong evidence in your management system documentation when it comes to showing how impartiality is practically implemented in your inspection body. Obviously, there are lots of other examples, But for me, you know, showing how your organization operates in practice is actually one very good example. I hope that one helps a bit.
Thank you very much, Linda. That was brilliant. However, I wanted to just to lessen what you just said, and from a side of disclosure, maybe it's important just to say, yes, Linda is correct. I'm advocating Saluba. I've been a regulator for quite a while. Hence, maybe this for me is quite exciting in terms of how do we regularize it. The part, Linda, that astounds me is that the standard speaks of type A, type B, type C, but I'm not hearing anything about type B. Could there be any reason?
Okay, so the reason, Nandipa, why you're not hearing anything about type B is because I don't really foresee any type Bs in this environment. Let me give you an example of a typical type B inspection body in another environment. Let's take, for example, the big petrochemical company, Sasol, for example. They have within their own company various accredited inspection bodies. They, for example, have an inspection body that does the testing on their portable gas cylinders. They also have an inspection body that inspects the various pressure vessels that they have on their sites. Now, these inspection bodies work only for Sasol. So a type B inspection body is an inspection body that works only for the mother company. So if you can picture it, you've got the big Sasol company, and within this company, you have two smaller sub-companies, a gas test station and a pressure vessel inspection body. And those companies don't ever do work for outsiders or for other customers. They only work for Sasol. So that is why they are a type B, and there are very specific requirements again for type Bs. But as I say, at the moment, I don't foresee, I might be wrong, I don't foresee that being so prevalent in this industry, but it might be, but at least then now we all know what a type B is. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. Adil, do you have anything to add to this? On the what form of evidence should be provided as an instrument to document the...
I think Linda gave us very good examples. She covered it. Thanks.
Okay. All right. Then next question. Should you be, it's also from Louis Erasmus, should you be a one-man business? How does verification and cross-verification come into play?
All right. If you're a one-man business, I was such one for a long time. It comes back to you that verification in terms of, let me just get my words straight here. You are the one doing all the verification of the data and everything, as well as the cross-verification. But the problem with a one-man business is cross-verification becomes a bit difficult, because who double checks your work now? Have you done your work properly? I cannot give it to the client because they've got vested interest to double check that. I cannot give it to another MNV company because then I've got business risk and in losing a client. Who do I trust? Who can I work with? Who can I not work with? And eventually it comes back to building in enough checks, credibility checks and gateways, checks and gateways, to show that whatever information you've been working with has been dealt with correctly. Any working on data has been done correctly. An example would be you get half an hour data for the whole year, and you convert that to daily data or to monthly or to annual data, and a double check would be the sum of this annual data and the sum of the half-hourly data, they should be the same. Yes, so that is a simple example of cross-verification. Cross-verification can also be the moment you use someone to help you out with something. For instance, the client is actually giving you the half-an-hour data. How do you cross-verify that? Okay, client, let me sit with you either in a video conference or on site actually. And okay, let's look at 17 September, 8 o'clock. I've got here 15 megawatt hours. What do you have on your system? Oh, it's the same. Okay, choose 4, 5, 6 other random examples. That's an idea of cross-verification. If you're more than one person, that sort of thing should happen anyways, in any case. But if you're a one-man person, at the end of the day, it becomes so much more difficult just to prove that you've done everything correctly. And that means you need to test yourself over and over again. And you need to think carefully about these tests on how do you do that, because it could also be influenced. And therefore, this is where the SANAS process helps again. You must get some form of an external auditor for internal audit going. You cannot audit yourself. So you need to get an external auditor to audit your system as well as a what they call a vertical assessment on your technical capabilities and so forth as well. So that means there's a third party already coming in to double check to work on that. That's, other than that, I can just say, yeah, keep your head clear and deal as much as possible with conflict of interest to try and eliminate that as much as possible. Is that good enough for you, Louis, or Linda? Would you like Adil add something here?
Christo, I think from my side, you captured it very well. Always remember that 17020 says a one-person company may be accredited as long as all the requirements of the standards are adhered to. So what Christo has said is true. You as the one person organization, you have the obligation to show to the SANAS assessors how you implement the requirements of the standard. And, you know, there are ways and means. The only area that you would normally have to get somebody to assist you would be, as Christo mentioned, with your internal audits, because the standard says that the internal auditor has to be independent of the activities that are being audited. So that would be one instance where you will have to then get an external person to come and assist you with that. But otherwise, Christo, I think you captured it well.
Thank you, Linda.
Christo, thank you very much. As well, thank you. Christo, you just mentioned external auditor. Will that be an EPC accredited person?
May I answer for you, Christo?
Yeah, please, yes. Okay,
so if we look at the requirements of 17020, the two major requirements for internal auditors are the following. Firstly, the internal auditor shall be knowledgeable and experienced in doing internal audits. So the first requirement means that the person you are getting to do your internal audits shall have some experience, some training, some evidence that you can then show that this person has been trained in doing internal audits. And then secondly, the person shall be technically competent in the areas in which he or she is doing the internal audits. So that would then basically mean that if a person wants to do internal audits, let's say on raw data and EPC certificates that have been issued to customers, that internal auditor, him or herself, should also then be qualified and experienced in EPCs. It does not mean that the person also has to come from an accredited EPC body, because I'm sure there are lots of other people out in industry who do have that knowledge and experience. They just choose not to become accredited. But as long as the inspection body can show that the internal auditor is competent in the field in question, in this case EPCs, then that would be sufficient. So it's all about evidence again. Unfortunately, you know, the international standards for conformity assessment all revolve around being able to show, being able to prove things. So once again, if the evidence is there, no problem. And then the other thing also, remember, as the inspection body, you would basically then appoint this internal auditor to perform the internal audit for you. So there will be some form of a contract or an agreement that would need to be in place as well. I hope that clarifies it.
Thank you very much, Linda. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. Well said. Yes, yes, yes. Thanks.
Okay. Adil, did you want to add anything to that?
Just in terms of the one-person entity, just a practical aspect of it, is the review of your work. You know, how you go about sort of double-checking what you've put on paper. It's more than one person, because someone writes the report and someone goes and reviews it and catches all your spelling mistakes and your calculation errors or whatever the case may be. But in one person entity, how do you go about just doing a check on yourself, how you set that up in your company? Yes.
Is that a question? I hope not.
I just wanted to say, I thought you were going to give us an answer. It sounded like a question to me. So basically, Adil is asking a question saying, collecting the data, who are you going to get to help you check that data? So
I'm just saying you process your results and you write your report, but you can also make mistakes in what you write. And I'm trying not to look at Crystal because I know he's a one-person entity. So it's just a matter of how do you make sure that what you put out at the end of the day has been properly reviewed before it goes out.
Can I come in, Yolanda?
please.
Okay, Adil, you should be asking questions, you should provide answers. But guys, we don't need to overcomplicate the issue. You know what? Say, for example, you prepare your raw data and you draft your report and you check it once, and then you let it stand till the following day, and then you recheck it. In my opinion, that is a form of double checking, because, you know, when you come back the next day with a fresh pair of eyes and you recheck everything, it means that you have actually done a double check in this one-person organization. And if you actually include that in your procedure, in other words, that is your way of verifying or making sure or checking that your reports are accurate, that would be acceptable to an assessor. So I think we just need to be practical in our approach, and just make sure that we proceduralize what we do, and then it's not so difficult. As I mentioned, the only time when we would need to get in another person would be for the internal audits. But as far as the checking is concerned, for me, it works well maybe to do something today and let it stand, and tomorrow come back and recheck it again.
Okay, thank you, Linda. That is what I do with all my stuff. And I am not an inspection body or
so Yolanda, we can actually then accredit you as well.
Okay, it's only because I'm Dutch that I have to do that. All right. Then the next question is from Nandipa again. There's definitely, well, she's making a statement and then asked a question. So there's definitely verification process and data collection, and a process to ensure that data is reliable and valid. She's asking, could you elaborate on the report? Does it accompany the submission of each activity? Who would like to answer that? I'm assuming, Nandipa, you're talking about the report. It's that summary report in the SANS 1544.
Definitely so. Definitely so.
Okay. Yeah. So yes, I think Adil must answer this because this is specifically to do with EPCs.
Yes, yes.
No questions, Adil, answer.
Okay, well, I'll at least ask you to repeat the question first. Yeah.
I will. So Nandipa says there is definitely verification process on data collection and a process to ensure that data is reliable and valid. She's asking, could we elaborate on the report? Does it accompany the submission of each activity? So she's talking about the report in SANS 1544, that pink and yellow thing that goes with the, it's like a summary of what the building is about.
Okay, so yeah, so your end result is the certificate that you put out, but in conjunction with that, it's always good to have a report. Now, from the purpose of, let's say, I'll speak about my inspection body. So one of the good things about that report is it details and it documents our whole thinking process behind everything. Like Krista mentioned, there are things that are judgments that you have to make. There are things that require interpretations. And for us, the report spells it out for the person that reviews the work, what we went through the whole thinking process with everything, considering the 1720, considering the SANS 1544. So it gives the person that reviews the work an idea of how we got to the results that's in the certificate. So that's basically what we do with the report. However, we have had requests for reports to go along with the certificates from clients because they want to see the same thinking process, or because they want to be able to look at their other buildings and see what is the inspection body going to look at, so that they can sort of get an idea beforehand what their rating is going to be, or how the process works. So that's basically the sort of usefulness of the report, even though the certificate at the end of the day is the final thing that is the most important thing to have.
Yes. Thank you. I think as a client, I would also like that report, and in our assignment, we require the report so that we can understand where the actual certificate's result came from. It just eliminates a lot of questions as well. Thanks, Adil. Then, Linda, do you have something to add there?
Nothing to add, thanks.
Okay, then I'm going to just skip one question on and then go back. So from Frank Duvenhagen, he's asking a really good question. Are official partnerships between energy management companies and an accredited inspection body a conflict of interest, or only if there is a formal cross-shareholding between the two companies? Or is there no conflict if the inspection body can prove that none of the technical signatories are involved in the energy management company's management at the building in question? I think we have answered that, but maybe just re-clarify that.
Yeah. You just muted yourself on the last portion, but okay.
Sorry. Over to you, Krista, if you want to take it.
Frank, basically you sort of answered yourself there. Whether the two companies do separate work, separate clients or not, there's already a perceived conflict of interest that you need to address and clarify. So always go in with the assumption that although we do different work, excuse me, many moons ago, we were part of a conglomerate. We were focusing on M&V, in the other portion we're focusing on energy management. And there's immediate, with wherever you go, there's that question that immediately comes to the front that, listen, but how do we know you're not influenced there? And before we get to a client, we also had to make sure that the other portion of the business wasn't involved currently or will not be involved in the near future, or it was not involved in the near past. So that conflict of interest will always be there. So my suggestion would be, whatever you do, wherever you do, always have something in place to double check that the conflict of interest has been managed properly, to show that you have not been influenced and your impartiality as an inspection body for EPCs has not been compromised. So are official partnerships between energy management companies and accredited inspection bodies a conflict of interest? Yes. So you need to manage that. Whether there's formal cross-shareholding or not, if there's shareholding, cross-shareholding is even more important, because then shareholding already says we need to get the shares up. So you guys need to perform and you guys need to perform. How can we perform better? How can we use the one to build up the other? That's already what goes on in the mind of the competitor, of the accreditation facility. If you get to an arbitration, hopefully never, that's what goes through the arbitration's head. So those stuff you need to sort out right there, right then at the beginning, before you even start thinking about going to a company or a client.
Thanks.
Yeah,
Linda or Adil, do you want to add something to that?
Just to add to that, Yolanda, one of the things that you also have to look out for is, even if it's not a formalized, not like cross shareholding or something like that, you also be aware of, I almost want to say, your quantity of work. Are you getting the bulk of your work from this one entity? Because then that also becomes a bit of a conflict of interest that you have to look at. Because then there's different pressures involved now dealing with that entity when doing EPCs, if most of your work comes from there. So that is definitely something to look at and manage in that type of relationship.
I actually have a question on that. So in a case of a buddy-buddy system, so now I'm an energy management company, and I also do EPCs, but I'm going to undertake not to do EPCs on the buildings I work with. But Gabriel over there is also an energy management company, and he's also doing EPCs, but he's not going to do EPCs on his buildings. So I'm going to do EPCs on Gabriel's buildings that I don't, that he does energy management on, and Gabriel's going to do all the EPCs on my buildings that I do energy management of. How do you handle a situation like that? Because I have actually noticed that there are discussions on this trend elsewhere.
Yeah, it becomes the same as Adil has just mentioned, that if one is supplying work to the other, and that becomes a habit for, say, that perceived conflict of interest can become more and more and larger, because at some stage you need to, I would say for the first time or the second time it's fine, but at the third, fourth, fifth time, someone can ask the question, how do I know that EPC is not giving me a bad rating so he can get the work to up the EPC at the later stage. So again, it's doable, but the T's and C's apply, terms and conditions. And the terms and conditions is the whole impartiality section of 17020 and TR 80-02. And you need, again, assume you're guilty of having a conflict of interest. How do you resolve that? And it becomes difficult, again, as they have it. And the trend towards business today is a sort of a joint venture between smaller companies. This is an energy management expert, this is an M&V expert, this is a that expert. How do you prove? And this is what you need to do. There are ways to do so, but you need to think about it, get those procedures in place, enforce those procedures, and have those procedures double-checked more often than what you think is necessary, to show that your impartiality is still in place and that you have not been influenced by your partnership somewhere else. And again, if it becomes too difficult to prove, that means you already stepped in it. You need to eliminate that problem area.
Thanks. Linda, have you got anything to add to that?
No, I think, you know, guys, this is going to be a very difficult area at the moment, because you know, in the example that was given, there is definitely a conflict. So you know, you'll have to manage that conflict by either you know, getting rid of the conflict completely or putting measures into place. And that will definitely be something that these SANAS assessors would need to look at. Yes, I think, you know, we will still have lots of discussions about this issue going forward as the practices basically unfold, because this is a new field. But yes, I think we would have to be very careful. And applicant inspection bodies need to sit down and ask themselves, you know, all these questions and what the risks are that are going to be involved if they have these types of partnerships, and they must know upfront that they would have to have evidence in place to show how they mitigate these risks if they do have these partnerships.
Thanks, Linda. I'm going to ask the last two questions. Time's almost up, and then we will wrap up. So Deepa asked again, how do you manage conflict of interest within consulting, in sourcing, practically to avoid double dipping? She mentions managing confidentiality as a conflict of interest strategy. Do you have anything? So basically she's asking to avoid double dipping. Nandipa, I think we've been discussing that, quite a number of examples, and I'm sure some more creative people will come up with more creative ideas as to how to do it as we go along, as Linda said. Then the last question is, where Linda spoke about the internal auditing. Nandipa wants to know, does this mean the internal auditor must have done ISO IEC 17020 training, or which one, as the data is of a technical nature?
Okay, so Yolanda, I can quickly answer that. Remember, ISO IEC 17020 consists of two parts: the management system requirements as well as the technical requirements. So for the management system requirements, the answer is yes. The person would definitely have needed to do some ISO IEC 17020 training, and evidence shall be available. And when it comes to the technical side of things, one would typically want to see that the person has done some SANS 1544 training, so that he or she then understands exactly what the technical aspects are involved in generating the EPCs. So the answer is yes, ISO IEC 17020 as well as SANS 1544.
Okay, thank you very much. That's nice and clear. Then a last question from me to Linda. Which ISO 17020 or SANS 17020 training do you recommend, and where can people access such training? Are there any platforms that is available? We usually tell people when they ask us to contact you, but maybe we can bypass you, that you don't get so many emails from our candidates, and send them to the right place.
Okay, so Yolanda, that question falls in exactly the same category as a question that we get very often, and that is, can you tell us which consultant to use to help us write our management system? And we always say, no, we can't. So with the SANS 17020 courses, it's actually the same answer. I cannot really recommend any particular course, because there are various course providers available. SANAS does actually present a generic 17020 course. That our training department is completely independent from the operational side, and they present courses on all the various standards in which we accredit. So if you, for example, attend a 17020 course at SANAS, it will be a generic 17020 course. So it's not going to focus specifically on EPC, although the courses do have lots of examples depending on the attendees of the course. But as I say, nowhere in any of the requirements is it a requirement that you shall attend a SANAS 17020 course. There are lots of other courses available, and as long as it's a reputable course and people can show that all the various clauses of 17020 have been addressed, that would be acceptable. Also, maybe I can just mention in 17020, it does not say that you shall attend a formal 17020 course. So there are lots of informal ways also of familiarizing and training yourself on 17020 in terms of self-study. But as I've mentioned earlier, again, evidence then needs to be there. So if you say to a SANAS assessor, I did not attend a formal course, but I did self-study, the assessor will ask you or will say to you, that's good, but can you please show me what your self-study entailed? So then you would need to be able to show to the assessor what you've actually done. Let's say your syllabus in inverted commas then in terms of your self-study. So Yolanda, I know I'm not giving you a specific answer, but yeah, there is not a specific answer to your question. Thanks.
Thank you very much. I have been sharing options as well to keep it safe on our side too. So thank you very much for that. Linda, I'm really very happy that you could make time. I know you were very busy and this was short notice, and the webinar series was launched at short notice to make sure we kill any misconceptions in the market and keep everyone on the straight and narrow. So I really appreciate, I think you added tremendous value to the webinar. I don't think it would have been as good if you weren't here to assist us in addressing these questions. So thank you very much for that. Christo, as always, Thanks for your insight and preparation and always being available to help all of us and help everyone on our assignment group. Adil, to you as well, thanks for sharing your experience. To the SAC and the SAC board, thank you for inviting me to sort of moderate the session today. And thanks to Gabriel and Tida for advertising and getting this going. I think it's a very important discussion today, and I think many things were clarified. Note that the recordings are going to be available to members on the SAC's website. So if you log in, it should be available there. And then don't miss the next webinar, which is going to also be a very contentious one. So I'm sure Gabriel's going to want me to be there. If nobody wants to, then I'm always the sitting duck. And so the next one, I think, is how to quote for energy performance certificate work and realistically looking at it, which will also be important for your clients to understand, because I think many clients do not understand how much work it actually is. In our assignment group, and those of you who are in there, the feedback has been you looking at quite a number of hours, and the requirements and understanding the technical side of it is not just for anybody. There are things that need to be understood properly and done properly. So thanks very much, and I will hand over to SAC to close the site unless there's any other clarifications required. Keep well.
Thank you, Yolanda. Thank you to our speakers. Enjoy the rest of your day.